Okay, we are going to continue our study in the Old Testament survey and a survey of the Old Testament. We start in Exodus chapter 1, and we will go through Exodus chapter 6, and then we will go through to Exodus chapter 12. In other words, we have two basic divisions. I would say that the next study that we're looking at right now has basically bashed, birth, bush, backlash, and better because. It's the first time I think I've used B, 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 and B, but I think it fit real well. First of all, you see Israel's oppression in Egypt. We took notice that they have gone into the land of Goshen, which is in the area of Egypt. Pharaoh would give Israel that land, and they began to multiply, the Bible would say. Look at chapter 1, verse 8. There happens to have happened, there arose a new king over Egypt who knew not Joseph. Well, that means a period of time has gone by. He said unto his people, behold, the people of Israel are more and mightier than we. Let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that there be a falling out in any war. They join themselves to the opposition. And so what he figured to do was to start oppressing them instead of letting them live free. I guess that's why we have the lesson, God is a libertarian. Now, we're using that. We said that in a lesson in order to get to the idea that God is one who allows men to be free in their actions. Yes, he has laws, and those laws are how to interact with people so that you don't use your freedom to hit somebody in the nose. Be that as it may, this king, as all dictators and tyrants, they cannot stand for somebody to have freedom. So they do something about it. Well, they began to grow so much that, looking at verse 15, the king of Egypt spake unto the midwives of the Hebrews and said unto them, when you do the office of midwife to the Hebrew women, see them upon the birth stool. If it be a son, kill him. If it be a daughter, let her live. The midwives feared God. By the way, did you notice they are named in verse 15? They are named in God's book because they feared God. They respected, they had reverence for God. And God did not, as the king of Egypt commanded them, and they did not, as the king commanded them, but saved the men children alive. Well, that brings us to chapter 2, and that would be the birth of Moses, based upon the fact that they were being oppressed so severely. God has a leader. God would choose and elect a leader. Be sure and understand something when we get to chapter 9 and have been in chapter 9 of Romans, that the selection of individuals to do the will of God still left them with free will not to do it. Moses has the choice to do what God suggests for him to do, commands for him to do, or not to do it. So does Pharaoh. We have studied that particular thought a number of times. Well, since the midwives were commanded to take the lives of the boys, that meant that Moses is going to die, but they save him alive. The mother takes the child down to the river, puts him in an ark. That's not a big ark, it's a little ark. Well, Miriam is watching things. That's Moses' sister. She's older. she's watching things, making sure that he's taken care of. Pharaoh's daughter comes down and takes the child home and raises the boy. Well, the suggestion comes to the ear of Pharaoh's daughter. You could get a midwife, you could get a wife out of the Hebrews, and that mother can take care of Moses. So Miriam goes and gets Moses' mother. That's fortunate. As time goes on, you recognize that things are not going necessarily the way that they want them to go. I think it's in chapter 3. It looks like verse 11. That's the wrong one. Let's look at we'll just look at the Bible and say what it says. You have Moses being raised as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He sees a Hebrew being abused by the Egyptian. So he takes the life of the Egyptian and buries him. Thinks nobody knows about it. Well, shortly thereafter, the next day, well, he sees a couple of Hebrews fighting. Oh, y'all need not to be fighting like that. Oh, well, you kill us like you did the Egyptian yesterday? Uh-oh. Moses recognized there's a problem. So he would flee unto Midian, chapter 2, verse 11, and following. He meets with, at the well, he meets with Jethro's daughter, Zipporah, and he marries Zipporah. Now, Jethro is rule, and he's a high priest of God in the land of Midian, which means you don't have to be a Jew in order to be the high priest, and a host of other things. So we continue looking, and we see that Moses is now in the land of Midian. He has sons and a wife, a father-in-law, and he's living as a shepherd. But the children of Israel, chapter 2, verse 23, they cry unto God. The Bible says in verse 24, chapter 2, God heard their groaning. That's the same word found in Acts chapter 7, groaning, that's found in Romans chapter 8. That means that they are expressing to God inarticulately how they are suffering and hurting. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God saw the children of Israel and took knowledge of them. When he takes knowledge of something in this manner, then it means he's about to do something. And sure enough, in chapter 3, he would appear unto Moses in the burning bush. Now, let me suggest to you, there is the fact that the text will tell you, both in this chapter and also in Acts chapter 7, that the angel spoke to Moses out of the burning bush. Well, Jehovah had his messenger. And when you have the messenger speaking, you have Jehovah speaking. And so he's going to deliver, God is going to deliver the children of Israel out of the hand of the Egyptians, but he's going to do it through Moses. And so he chooses Moses to be the one to deliver the people. There's been a great movie, I think it's about 1933. I can't remember for sure. Cecil DeMille and the Ten Commandments, and they show it every year on television. Quite a work, especially when he's able to part the Red Sea. Everybody wondered how he did that. So God would appear unto Moses and choose him. He would let him know that he is going to be the one that would take the name of God to the Egyptians. Look at chapter 3, verse 14. God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me to you. Thus I am is his name. again, when you jump over to John and you hear Jesus saying, I am, you know what is being said in that text because of Exodus. Verse 15, God said, moreover unto Moses, thou shalt say unto the children of Israel, Jehovah, the God of our fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations. He was not known by the name of Jehovah before this. Now he is being known, being made known through what Moses has done. And so in chapter 3:16, there are certain instructions given unto the elders, as God says, go, gather the elders of Israel, and say unto them, Jehovah, the God of our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, hath appeared unto me. I will visit you, seeing what is being done in Egypt. And I have seen the affliction that has come upon you by the Egyptians. I will deliver you out of their hand. Looking at verse 18, thou shalt hearken to thy voice, and thou shalt come, and thou and the elders, unto the king of Egypt. So Moses, Aaron, and all of the elders are going to go before Pharaoh, the king, and request to let my people go. A statement that's made over and over and over again through the book of Exodus. We want to go 3 days journey and sacrifice unto God, worship God, serve Jehovah, our God. In chapter 4, we recognize that God says, Moses, you are equipped. Moses says, I'm not equipped. Now, what occurs at the first part of chapter 4 is interesting compared to the miracles that are going to come in the face of, before, in the presence of Pharaoh. God would tell Moses, when Moses expresses a little bit of doubt, how are they going to believe me? And God would say, well, throw down your staff. It's shepherd's staff. And it turned into a serpent. And he said, pick it up by the tail. He picked it up and it returned to being a staff. Kind of reminds you of the magicians, doesn't it? The distinction is this. Moses believes. The magicians and Pharaoh do not. They both have the same opportunity. But the Egyptians will not believe. By the way, he goes on and says, put your hand in your bosom. He did, and he took it out. And it was white like leprosy, did it again, and it was healed of the leprosy. Looking at chapter 4, verse 10 and following, you have Moses now complaining about the fact that I can't speak. Now that sounds about like all of us. We can't speak. We work at it, we strive at it, we try hard to be good speakers, but sometimes it just doesn't work. Well, Moses said, it's never going to work. I'm not a good speaker. God says, I'll get you a mouth. I'm the one that created the mouth. I know what to do. But Moses didn't like that. He didn't want to be the mouth. So he's making excuses. Seems like even godly men make excuses, don't they? Looking at chapter 4, verse 14, and the anger of Jehovah was kindled against Moses, and that's not going to be the last time either. And said, is there not Aaron thy brother? I know he can speak well. Behold, he cometh forth to meet thee, and when he seeth thee, he will be glad in his heart. So God chooses Aaron to be the prophet of Moses. This is a good place to define what a prophet is. So many times we think that a prophet is someone who always tells the future. I remember a number of teachers over the years saying that's not accurate. A prophet, biblically speaking, is a forth teller, not simply a foreteller. Yes, in God's man, a prophet, certainly in most cases, if not nearly all of them, he is a foreteller, but he is more so a forth teller. Moses was a prophet of God, Deuteronomy 18. And what Moses did was go back in time and tell you and write about the Garden of Eden and write about the choosing of Abraham as the seed. And he would pin the idea of the sacrifice of Isaac. He pinned all of these things and he wasn't there. They had already occurred. So he's doing more than simply foretelling. He would foretell Deuteronomy 18:15, but a prophet's main job is to foretell. So Aaron is going to be the mouth, the spokesman for Moses. Moses would be a god too, meaning in a certain way. He's not saying you're deity. So therefore, Moses has a prophet, one who would speak for him. It would be Aaron. But what you're going to hear is Moses said, Moses said, Moses said. Since Aaron is the spokesman for Moses, Moses is saying it through Aaron. Looking at, let's skip down to chapter 4, verse 24. And if you don't skip more, you're not going to get through. Chapter 4, verse 24, it came to pass on the way of the lodging place that Jehovah met Moses and sought to kill him. Zipporah, his wife, took a flint and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at his feet and said, surely a bridegroom of blood art thou to me. So let him alone. Then she said, a bridegroom of blood art thou because of circumcision. Moses, your children are not circumcised. Why not? I wonder how many warnings Moses received. Don't know. Don't even know that he received any. But I know God was angry, a righteous anger, a godly wrath, because of rejection of what God has commanded the children of Abraham, circumcision, Genesis chapter 15. Skipping down to chapter 4, verse 27 and 31, especially 31, and the people believed when they heard that Jehovah had visited the children and that had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and they worshiped. Exodus chapter 5. Moses and Aaron confront Pharaoh. Thus saith Jehovah, the God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. And Pharaoh said, who's Jehovah? Sometimes I wonder if that's the right question. Richard Rogers, a teacher out of Texas a number of decades ago, said when you get to chapter 12 and 15, and the death of 600 Egyptian soldiers and chariots, Pharaoh now knows who Jehovah is. It's an excellent point to be made. And so he would say, let my people go in chapter 5, verse 9. Since all of these problems have come our way, there shall be heavier work upon the men since they want to go running into the wilderness. In chapter 5, verse 15, let's see if I can get they made it even stronger, a greater problem. Chapter 5, verse 20. The elders met with Moses and Aaron, who stood in the way as they came forth from Pharaoh, and they said unto them, Jehovah look upon you and judge, condemn, because ye have made our Savior, our taste, to be abhorred in the eyes of Pharaoh, in the eyes of his servants, to put a sword in their hand to slay us. You have done this. Do you catch what's going on? Things have turned bad, and since things have turned bad, Pharaoh is taking it out on the people of God with this great burden of making their own bricks and building more than what they were building, making them work more than what they were working. Who do the Israelites blame? Moses, Aaron. They're the ones with the message. Shoot the messenger. Don't try to understand the message. Just shoot him. And that's what they were trying to do. Looking at chapter 6, I'm sure we could have gone through a few more details, but those are good headline things. I have entitled this particular chapter, Reaffirms His Covenant Name, Jehovah. I want you to notice chapter 6, verse 1 through verse 9. Jehovah said unto Moses, Now shalt thou see what I will do to Pharaoh. For by a strong hand shall he let them go, and by a strong hand shall he drive them out of his land. The emphasis I want to make is this. I am, I will. I've known the time that I have said, well, I can do that. I'll try to do it. That's not Jehovah. Jehovah tells you who he is. I am. I will. And it produces a great comfort for people who believe in Jehovah, the God of all. Hitting the headlines, chapter 6, verse 6. Wherefore say unto the children of Israel, I am Jehovah, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will rid you out of their bondage, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm with great judgments. I will take you to me for my people. I will be to you God. Ye shall know that I am Jehovah, your God, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. Verse 8, I will bring you into the land which I swear to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you for an inheritance. I am Jehovah. Here's what is great to reflect upon. The people have cried unto God. God has decided to do something. And when God decides to do something, it gets done. Let's turn our attention now to the plagues. And I suppose one of the first things I want to say to you is that whenever you look at these plagues, I remember in times past, I seem to emphasize each one plague was addressing one of the gods of Egypt. Since then, I have noticed a chart that's on the internet, and it's a great chart, and I hadn't paid that much attention to the distinction. But this chart says this. Each one of these plagues will address more than one of the gods of Egypt and shows that Jehovah is greater than all of them put together. You have the beginning of the plagues with chapter 7, verse 14, where Moses would change the water of Egypt into not wine, but blood. Everywhere the Egyptians went, all their water was blood. Well, Moses would say, let my people go, or that's what's going to happen. Well, sure enough, it came to pass. And they began to cry unto Jehovah, stop. So the Lord did. In chapter 8, verse 1, Jehovah said unto Moses, go unto Pharaoh and say unto him, thus saith Jehovah, let my people go, that they may serve me. If thou refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all the borders with frogs. We have little tree frogs up here. Itty bitty tree frogs, itty bitty. And they go bouncing everywhere. I saw one of them jump about 18 inches the other day. But they make a lot of noise. And so all of Egypt would swarm with frogs everywhere. Jehovah saith unto Moses, verse 5, saying to Aaron, stretch forth thy hand that thou rod over the rivers and over the streams and over the pools, cause frogs to come up out of the land. And Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. Don't you know that was miserable? Let me see. Looking at verse 10, Moses said unto, look at verse 9, Moses said unto Pharaoh, have thou this glory over me? Against what time will I entreat thee for thy servants, for thy people, for thy frogs be destroyed from thee? And remained only in the river. And he said, against tomorrow. So it came to pass on the time in which Moses said so, there were no more frogs in the land. The frogs, verse 11, departed. Verse 13, Jehovah did according to the word of Moses. The frogs died out, and they gathered them together in heaps, and the land stunk. But Pharaoh saw this respite, hardened his heart, and he would not let the people go. So you have the third plague, which would be lice. Some would say gnats. I saw that particular thought. Aaron stretched out his hand, and he smote the grass, and there, the land, the dust. There were lice upon man and upon beast. The magicians cried out and would say, chapter 8, verse 19, this is the finger of God. Let me make the point here, because when you get to the New Testament and you hear about the finger of God and demons, you recognize that it's not a finger that he's talking about. It's a figure of speech that says this is the power of God. And by the way, we would add he has more power in his little finger than all the powers of anybody, anywhere, anytime. But Pharaoh hardened his heart, chapter 8, verse 19, and he would not let the people go. The fourth plague was flies. Let my people go, said Moses in verse 20, that they may serve me. Else, if thou wilt not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies upon thy servants, the people, the houses, the lands, upon the Egyptians. I will set apart, verse 22, in that day the land of Goshen. The flies are not going to be flying around in Goshen like they are in the land of Egypt. Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron, verse 25, and said, go ye sacrifice unto your God in the land. We will go 3 days' journey. Oh, no, said Pharaoh, we can't let that happen. Moses said, behold, I go out from there, and I will entreat Jehovah that the swarms of flies may depart from Pharaoh, from his people tomorrow. Only let not Pharaoh deal deceitfully anymore. Pharaoh, time and again, has said, you can I'm going to let the people go. I'm going to let the people go. And then he wouldn't do it. Now, if you don't want to hear this as a political statement, that's fine. But that's exactly what's going on between the United States and those that are overseas. They negotiate a deal, they agree to the deal, and then they back out. The point that is being made with this text is this: when you make a deal and you back out of it, that's dealing deceitfully. Well, Pharaoh hardened his heart and he would not let the people go. Chapter 9. The livestock in Egypt will die, but not in the land of Israel. He said he'll let the people go, and then he changed his mind and he didn't let the people go. The sixth plague would be the boils. Chapter 9, verse 9, it shall become small dust over the land of Egypt, and shall be a boil breaking forth illness upon man and upon beast throughout all the land of Egypt. Have you noticed everything's happening to Egypt now? The seventh plague is the hail that would come in chapter 9, verse 13. Have you ever been in a hailstorm outside in the middle of those big hail drops that are hitting? Two situations that I found out, well, three really. We were driving down to Texas with my mother in 1955, and it was a big hailstorm. She ran under one of those overpasses, and we didn't get what was going on around us. And then Bernie and I used to go out to the lake and we'd ride our bikes. I went riding around and got within a mile of getting back to where I needed to be, and it started hailing. I'm riding a bike. I'm out in the middle of nowhere. Murney is not helping me. He's nowhere around. I'm telling you, I don't know how. And it wasn't a miracle or supernatural. I rode my bike, got back to my truck, threw my bike in the truck, got back in the truck, and didn't get hit once. I thought that was great. On the other hand, there was a hailstorm around here a couple of years ago. And I'm telling you, they were big pieces of ice. They would dig into the ground, dig into the roof, tear it up, dig into cars. It went off. It destroyed Wanda's pickup. Could you imagine getting hit by one of those? Well, they were having that kind of trouble. Chapter 9, verse 12. And Pharaoh hardened, hearkened not unto them. He hardened his heart again. Pardon me, that should be the next round. Let's see, we're looking at chapter 9, verse 35. He did not let the children of Israel go. In chapter 10, you have the locust and the darkness. The darkness was not in the land of those of Israel, but only in Egypt, and he would not let the people go. In chapter 12, you have the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And the instructions go like this, chapter 12, verse 15. And by the way, the reason that it goes like this is because there's going to be I think there's a big discussion over whether it's Passover angel or the death angel. Let's start in chapter 12. Look at verse 5. That's not right either. My apologies to you. Chapter 12, verse 1. Jehovah said unto Moses, Aaron, in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year. That says you're going to be let go and you're going to be a nation of your own and you're going to set your own calendar. But here's what you need to do, because he's going to take the life of the firstborn of every family, even the beast. Now we're in verse 5, and he says, Your lamb shall be without blemish. And you take that lamb and you slay it and you fix it for that night, and everybody in the house eats of that lamb. No blemish on it, a year old, can be a goat, but you eat and then don't leave any. Verse 12, you shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, but that which remaineth of it until the morning ye shall burn with fire. Nothing left over. When I read that, it called to my mind the sacrifice of Christ himself. Of course, the Passover feast, Jesus is our Passover, and we're going to be discussing in our worship the Lord's Supper, and we'll be discussing this background again. But there's nothing left over. Well, with Christ, there's a passage in Hebrews chapter 10:26. If we sin willfully after we have received the truth, there remaineth no sacrifice for sin. Now, Paul is not saying you can't take the sacrifice of Christ. You can, and you may return to Christ. What he's saying is, if you reject Christ, where are you going to go? You have no sacrifice. Well, here with the Egyptians, you seem to have a foretaste of that when you're not going to have anything left over. There's nothing to sacrifice anymore unto Jehovah in order to set somebody free. Quite a parallel, as I see it anyway. Chapter 12, verse 15, 7 days shall ye eat unleavened bread, and they will let you go. Sure enough, in chapter 12, verse 29, it came to pass at midnight that Jehovah smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat upon the throne until the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon. The cattle all died. And Pharaoh let the people go.